What does a fair job actually mean? In one country, it's all about a paycheck that's always on the rise. In another, it's about a set of rights so foundational they stick with you, even if the company gets sold. Today, we're taking a global tour of the world of work. And trust me, you're going to be surprised by just how different the rule books can be.
We all have this gut feeling, right? We know what makes a job feel fair. You want a decent salary, reasonable hours, some good benefits. But the minute you try to actually write that down into law, you find out that every single country has a completely different idea of what that means.
And that's because there's no universal blueprint for this stuff. Not at all. A country's labor laws are this unique reflection of its economy, its social priorities, and its own unique history. What's totally standard in one place could be completely unheard of, or hey, even illegal, just across the border. So, to see just how different these approaches can get, we're going to look at 3 specific case studies. First up, we've got Colombia, who we're calling the reformer because they're constantly tweaking and updating their rules. Then we'll contrast that with Brazil, the architect, which built its entire system on this massive foundational legal code. And finally, to really understand the costs involved, we'll look at Greece, the pragmatist, and their approach to funding the whole social safety net.
Let's start with the one thing everybody really cares about: the paycheck. But as you're about to see, even a simple number on a payslip can reveal a country's entire philosophy about work. So let's take Colombia, our reformer. They just rolled out a 9.5% minimum wage increase for 2025. That's a huge proactive jump. But what does a percentage like that actually translate to in real money, in someone's pocket? Well, this breakdown is super revealing. The base wage is over 1.4 million Colombian pesos. But look at this. The law also requires a separate transportation allowance. So that brings the total minimum income to over 1.6 million pesos. It's the law basically saying, hey, a fair wage in Colombia has to cover the cost of actually getting to work. It's baked right in.
Okay, so in Colombia, the focus is really on the employee's take-home pay. But in Greece, our pragmatist, the law is just as concerned with the total cost to the employer. Why? Because that's what pays for all the country's social programs. Just look at this split in Greece. The employer has to pay an extra 22% on top of the salary into Social Security. And then the employee contributes almost 14% themselves. Now, this isn't income tax. This is the actual engine that directly funds the entire social safety net. We're talking pensions, healthcare, unemployment benefits. It's a completely different philosophy on what the price of labor really is. So pay is one big piece of the puzzle. But what about the actual rules of the workplace? Are they about creating super specific regulations for modern problems? Or are they about protecting these big, timeless principles? Well, Colombia, our reformer, is the perfect example of that super regulatory approach. Their new rules for apprenticeships are incredibly specific. There's a maximum contract length, a clear pay scale, mandatory benefits. They even guarantee that your work gets certified as real experience. They're trying to spell out every single detail of the relationship. Now, contrast that with Brazil, the architect. Instead of a bunch of specific rules, you find these powerful, overarching principles. This quote here is a perfect example. It basically says it doesn't matter if your company gets sold, if it merges, whatever, your rights as a worker are protected. And that's not an accident. That's the legacy of a system built decades ago to create a strong social contract, a legal bedrock that was literally designed to stand the test of time. Okay, but what happens when things go wrong? Let's say a worker has a dispute with their employer. Well, the path to getting justice looks completely different depending on which country you're in. On the left, you've got Colombia's approach, a massive reform in 2024 designed to streamline everything, to adapt to contemporary needs. Then on the right, you have Brazil's system. It's not about constant change. It's about navigating this dense, complex code that's been the foundation of worker rights for decades. It's like one path is constantly being repaved to be faster, while the other is an ancient maze you just have to learn how to navigate. So why does any of this matter? Well, because in our globalized world, whether you're running a company with offices everywhere or you're a remote worker with a boss in another country, these local rules aren't just minor details. They literally define your reality. So what's the big takeaway from all this? First and foremost, labor law is not one size fits all. It is intensely local, a true reflection of a country's own identity. And for any international business, or any remote worker for that matter, ignoring these differences isn't just risky, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world actually works. At the end of the day, your rights, your pay, and your protections are all defined by these local codes.
And that leaves us with a really big question for the future, doesn't it? We've seen how different these systems are. We've got the reformer, the architect, the pragmatist. But as our work lives become more and more global, more interconnected every day, should the rules that govern them start to look a little more alike? Something to think about.